All right, so hello everyone. This is the sixth lecture on control and instrumentation module. Uh, in today's class, we are going to study about controllers. Now, in the previous classes, we have discussed about uh, the two types of controller, the closed loop, open loop control system. We also studied about how to develop the transfer function, how to reduce the block diagram of a control system, right? And then also, I think in the previous class, we discussed about how we can analyze the control system based on the value of poles and zeros. So whether our control system is going to be stable, unstable, or marginally stable, right? So we can analyze that using the location of poles and zero, right? So all those things we have discussed in the previous class. Now, in today's class, we are going to study about the different types of controllers which are available and which we normally use. So before moving on to that, uh, just in brief, we have already discussed about this in the previous classes. Just in brief, I would like to remind you about how does your controller work, or what is the main purpose of your controller. So basically, the main purpose of your controller is to control this process variable. So process variable, it could be anything. It could be a physical quantity such as your temperature or speed, or it could be anything for which you have designed your control system, right? So basically your control system, it is used to control this variable, right? Or to adjust the response of your system, right? So depending on the value of input, uh, your control system in the middle, it will adjust the output signal, right? It will try to give you the output signal equivalent to your input signal, or it will try to reduce the error signal. So that is the main purpose of your controller. Now, obviously, for this purpose, we use a feedback system where we compare the output signal with the input signal or the set point and generate an error signal. According to this error signal, your controller tries and reduces the error or the difference. Okay. Now, this reduction in error, or to bring your output closer to your input, it is conducted in cycles, right? So it's not like you provide the input and immediately you will get the output as you desire, right? It actually is conducted in cycles. So in the first cycle, maybe you may have some error, right? So which the controller will try to adjust, and then again your error may reduce. So something like we all have seen the response of a control system. General response, we do expect some kind of a overshoot. So maybe there was some initial error in the first cycle. Now the controller adjust that error or tries to reduce it. So in the second cycle, maybe the error, it reduces and gradually it reduces, and finally you get your response around the desired value. Okay. Finally, after some time or after some cycles, right? So maybe in the first cycle you had a large error which your controller reduced in the second cycle, and gradually it keeps on reducing it in the consecutive cycle, in the third, fourth, fifth, and finally after a few cycles your output reduces and it is around your desired value. Okay, that's how the controller it operates, right? So we have already discussed about this quite in detail in the previous classes. So it was just a reminder for you. Now, moving on to the types of controller. So, although there are variety of controllers nowadays, since everything is getting automated, right? We are trying to automize or make things automatic, right? So that's why we have variety of controllers, but mainly we are going to focus on uh, these three types of controller, which more or less covers all the basic type of controllers, right? So the first type of controller that we are going to discuss in today's class is on and off controller. So this controller is the simplest, and it is used in controlling the temperature of a room, something like in a heating system or a air conditioning system, right? So for all those things, we can use this on-off controller. It's one of the simplest uh, type of controller. The second type of controller is called as your PID controller, or the abbreviation or the full form of this PID is proportional, integral, and differential controller. Okay, so PID controller, right? So this PID controller, it from the abbreviation or the full form, you can identify that it has three parts, right? You have some proportional controller, you have a integral controller, and the third part is your differential controller. So your PID controller, it basically consists of three parts. Okay, we are going to discuss about this in detail, but this PID controller is quite widely used in industries and different applications, right? So since it is very widely used in industries, so we are going to discuss about this PID controller in detail, okay, in today's class. And then apart from these two controller, you have several other techniques, right, which we can use. So you have adaptive controller, so which adapts according to the changes in the condition. So I'm not going to discuss in depth about this adaptive controller. It's a complex controller, I would say. So although I will be giving you a brief background or the logic as to how these controller they operate, right? So you have adaptive controller, and then we have fuzzy logic controller. So fuzzy logic is also quite commonly used in home appliances, right? In home appliances, uh, it's something like in washing machines, microwave and all. So you have a controller, and that controller generally it is fuzzy logic controller. And then we are going to study about neural networks and genetic algorithm. So again, I will not go in depth um, for neural network and genetic algorithm, but I will give you a brief or a basic concept as to how they operate. Okay. So let's start with the first type of controller, that is on-off controller. Okay. So this is the response of your on-off controller. Now from the name itself, on-off. right? So at a certain condition, your controller will turn on something, and at a different condition, it will turn off your system, right? So it acts like a switch. If a certain condition is there, it will turn on your system or your plant, and if it is at a different condition or a different condition is met, it will turn off the plant or the process which it is connected to, which your controller is connected to. Okay, so let's take an example of heating system or cooling system. So basically we are trying to control the temperature of your room. Okay, heating system to control temperature of the room. Okay, so if you have a on-off controller connected to your heating system, so what we have to do is we have to first of all select 2 points. So let's say we have to control the temperature of the room around 25 degree centigrade. Okay, so that is my desired temperature. So I want to control the temperature of my room around 25 degree centigrade. So for designing a on-off controller, what I will do is I will select 2 points. So one of them is called the start point and the other one is called the stop point. So let's say if the temperature of my room falls to 15 degrees centigrade, okay, I want my heating system to turn on, right? I want heating to be on, turned on, right? And if the temperature rises up to, let's say, 30 degrees centigrade, I want the heating system to turn off. Okay, so for designing a control on-off controller, I have to select these 2 points, the start point and the stop point. So what your controller will do is so at the beginning, when you turn on your heating system along with your controller, so what your controller will do is it will start heating your room, and since the temperature is quite low, so once it reaches 30 degrees centigrade, or once the temperature of the room reaches 30 degrees centigrade, okay, the heating system will turn off, right? So at this point, when the temperature reached 30 degrees centigrade, the heating system or on-off controller will turn off the heating system, right? So over a period of time, the temperature of the room will slowly and gradually it will start falling, right? Once the temperature of the room reaches 15 degrees centigrade, okay, again this on-off controller will turn on the heating, right? So again the temperature of the room will start rising like that. So again once it reaches 30 degree centigrade, again the heating system will be turned off and this process will continue, right? So this on-off controller would keep the temperature of the room between 15 degree and 30 degree centigrade. Okay, so that's how this on-off controller it works. Now, from the working principle which I have explained, uh, it looks quite simple, right? So this type of on-off controller is, I would say, if I have to write the advantages, I would say this on-off controller is quite simple to design, right? So just we have to put a sensor, a thermocouple, which will measure the temperature of the room, and if the temperature reaches 30 degree, it has to turn off the system, and if it is below 15 degree or around 15 degree, it has to turn on the system, right? So it's quite simple to design this on-off controller, and obviously if it is simple to design, so it would be cheaper, right? So obviously you can imagine like what all components you would need. You would just need a thermocouple and some switching system, right, which turns on and off the heating system, right? So it won't be that expensive. It will be quite cheap. So these are the two advantages of your on-off controller. However, if we move on to disadvantage of this type of controller, you might have realized that the temperature of the room, it is maintained over a range, right, between 15 and 30 degrees centigrade, not around your desired temperature. Your desired temperature was 25 degree, but this controller is unable to maintain the temperature exactly around 25 degrees centigrade. Rather, it is maintaining the temperature between 2 points, start point and stop point. We call this range or band of temperature as dead band. Okay. So what I could say is the disadvantage of this on-off controller is that it is inaccurate. Okay. It is unable to maintain the temperature of my room, or unable to maintain the temperature of my room exactly at 25 degree centigrade, right? It is unable to do that. So it is inaccurate. Now, from the working principle again, the thing which could come into your mind is, why not we reduce the dead band, right? Why don't we keep it closer to the desired temperature? So in that way, uh, the temperature of the room will be quite close to the desired temperature. Why don't we reduce the dead band? Right? So why don't we select something like 24 and 26 degree, like that. 24 as the start point and 26 as the stop point. So in that way, if the on-off controller will be able to control the temperature of my room exactly or quite close to the desired temperature. Uh, you can do that, but the problem in reducing the dead band is if your dead band is quite close to the desired temperature, or this band is very narrow. So in that case, your controller will turn on and off your system very quickly, right? So if we have narrow dead band, so narrow dead band will increase switching speed, increase switching speed, right? So you can imagine if you are turning on and off any system very quickly after every, let's say, 2 seconds, if you are turning on and then after 2 seconds you are turning off, then again 2 seconds you are turning on, and then again 2 seconds you are turning off, right? So that is going to damage our heating system or whatever system you have connected it to, right? So reducing the dead band, you can control the temperature around the desired temperature, but it will increase the switching speed, and as a result of this, it will damage the heating system or any other system which you are trying to control, right? Even if you turn on and off an electric bulb, right, which provides the light, right? So if you turn on and off at a very fast rate, it will, your bulb will get damaged, right? We have to change the bulb if we do that, right? So it is not advisable to reduce the dead band to increase the accuracy. Uh, it will damage the system. Okay. Now, so all these points I have mentioned in this slide. So this on-off controller, it is quite simple, cheap, but it is inaccurate, right? Now controller at set point, not possible. So you cannot control the variable at a fixed point or at a set point. It is always within the dead band. There is a range of temperature within which you can control the temperature. You cannot control the temperature at a fixed point or at a fixed temperature, right? Using this on-off controller. Now you can reduce the narrow band, right? You can reduce the narrow, you can reduce the dead band, you can narrow it down. So narrow dead band will result in rapid switching. Okay, it will increase your switching speed, turning on and off. And as a result of that, it will warn your components or it will damage your component. Okay. Now again, you can increase the dead band, you can have a wide dead band, but that will obviously, it will be uh, inaccurate controller, or it will increase your inaccuracy, right? So this type of on-off controller is used to control the system in which the variable, it reduces or it changes very slowly. So something like in temperature, once you turn off the heating system, your temperature does not fall immediately, right? So once you heat the system, let's say up to a certain temperature, and you have turned off the system or the heating system, the temperature of the room, it will take some time to fall. It will not fall immediately. It will fall gradually. It will take some time, right? So this temperature changes very slowly, right? So we use this on-off controller where the variable such as your temperature, it changes very slowly over time, right? So in these kind of applications, we can use on-off controller. Okay. Now, the next type of controller is your PID controller. So PID controller, as I mentioned, it is quite widely used in industry. So we are going to discuss in detail about this PID controller. But for the time being, I'm trying to give you a brief introduction of your controller, PID controller. So this PID controller, it includes three parts. You have a proportional controller, you have integral controller, and a differential controller. So you have three parts in this PID controller. Okay. Now the error signal. So if you have a closed loop system, you generate the error signal by comparing the output with the input, and you get the difference or the error signal. So this error signal is sent to all these three parts, right? It is sent to your proportional controller. Then this error signal is sent to all the three parts, the integral as well as your differential, right? And they perform certain control action, and after that the output from each of these controller, they are then added together to achieve the final control signal. Control signal, or you can say the output of your PID. So basically the output of PID is the sum of the outputs from your proportional, integral and differential controllers. Okay, they all get added together. Now the output of your proportional uh, controller is this, the first term in this equation. So U of t is the output of PID. And the first term in this equation is the output from your proportional controller, right? So from the name proportional and from the output, you could see the output is proportional to the error signal. Kp is a constant, right? Similarly, your Ki is a constant, and Kd is again another constant, right? So the output of your proportional controller is proportional to the error signal. Okay. The second term in the output of PID, it is from your integral controller. Okay, from your integral controller. So again, Ki is a constant, and you can see the output it depends on the integration of your error signal. Yeah. And similarly, the last term in this equation is the output of your differential controller. So again, Kd is a constant, and you can see the output is it depends on the derivative or differentiation of your error signal. Yeah. So that's how the name it comes from. If the output is proportional to your error signal, you have this proportional controller, and if it depends on the integration of the error signal, that's your integral controller. And since the output is it depends on the differentiation of the error signal, right? So that becomes your differential controller. Okay. Now, in S domain, if we convert the given output in S domain, we can easily convert it into S domain. So the Laplace transform of Kp e of t, it will be simply Kp. And the integration, if you have an integration, it becomes 1 divided by S. Okay. And if you have a differentiation, you have simply you multiply Kd with S. Okay, right. So this is the output of PID in S domain. Output of PID in S domain. Now from this output, you can see if you have a free S term in the denominator, we used to call it uh, the in the previous class we have studied about the effect of free S term, right? So free S term is used to reduce the steady state error, and if you have a free S term in the numerator, it will increase the steady state error, right? So basically, in a PID controller, we adjust the value of Kp, Ki, and Kd, right? And try and bring the output closer to your desired value, right? So that's your desired value, and this is called as your steady state error. So the difference between the desired value and the output or the response in steady state condition, right? You have a transient response and a steady state response, right? So steady state error is the difference between your desired output and the output in steady state region. Okay, so based on the value of Kp, Ki, and Kd, we can kind of control the output and bring it as closer to the desired output as possible, right? Now Kp, Ki, and Kd, as I mentioned, they are constant values and they are called as proportional gain, integral gain, and the differential gain. So Kp is called the proportional gain, Ki is called the integral gain, and Kd is called the differential gain, right? Now after designing, so designing a PID is or implementing a PID is not sorry, designing a PID is not that difficult, but tuning these values or finding the appropriate values of these constant Kp, Ki, and Kd, that is a bit tricky, right? So basically, we have to find the best value of these constant Kp, Ki, and Kd, right? After we have implemented the PID controller, we have to find the best value of Kp, Ki, and Kd. And that is called as tuning the PID. Okay. Now, tuning the PID, you can do it manually. But if we look at the equation or the output of your PID, if you change the value of, let's say, any of the values, let's say Kp, if you are changing, you have to adjust the value of Ki and Kd as well, right? It's not simple as it sounds, but if you are doing it manually and if you adjust or change the value of Kp, you also have to change the value of Ki and Kd accordingly. So manually it is a bit difficult, I would say, and for that, for adjusting the value of these constants manually, it requires a lot of experience. So only control engineers with a little bit of experience in working with PID, they can do it manually. But for us who are beginners in control system and in PID, we have certain techniques or certain methods which we are going to discuss today uh, to tune the PID, right? To adjust or find the suitable values of these constant Kp, Ki, and Kd, right? So we'll discuss about that, but this is just in brief about PID. So in this class itself, we are going to discuss about the individual parts, the proportional, the integral, and the differential part of your PID controller, how they operate, right? So we are going to discuss that. But for the time being, let's continue with the types of controller, right? The next type of controller is your adaptive controller. So adaptive controller, they adapt to the changes in condition, right? So if the condition of your system it changes, the adaptive controller will take into account those changes and adjust its output. Okay. So for example, let's take an example of automatic flight control system, right? So your automatic flight control system is an example of adaptive controller. So in this, what happens is, let's take an example. If you have a flight from, let's say, Beijing to Singapore. So when the flight is taking off from Beijing, it has a full tank, right? Its fuel tank is full, and it has obviously the luggage, the passengers, and all. So the weight of the aircraft will be quite heavy, right? So your automatic flight control system will calculate the value of fuel intake and the thrust which it should produce to take off from Beijing, right? So it will calculate keeping in note of the weight of the aircraft. Okay. Now, once the flight is going towards Singapore, and it is obviously it will consume or burn some fuel. So once it reaches Singapore, the weight of the aircraft will reduce, right? So because it has during its journey, it has burned quite a lot of fuel. So the weight of the aircraft will be quite less in comparison to takeoff. So during the landing, this automatic flight control system, it will recalculate the value, again considering the mass or the weight of your aircraft, right? So since the mass or the weight of the aircraft has reduced, it will recalculate the value of thrust and the fuel intake which it should produce to land at Singapore, right? So it adapts to the changes. It adjusted the value of thrust which the engine should produce according to the weight of the aircraft, right? So it is adjusting according to the changes. So that type of controller is called as your adaptive controller, right? Which adapts or changes according to the condition of the system. Okay. The next type of controller is your fuzzy logic controller. So this fuzzy logic controller, again, it is quite widely used in home appliances. So something like washing machine. Okay. So the best part of fuzzy logic controller is that you do not have to design an accurate mathematical model, right? Do not need an accurate mathematical model. So as we have studied in the previous classes, we before implementing a controller, we have to design a mathematical model, test it. Once we are satisfied that with that model, only then we implement it physically, right? But in the case of fuzzy logic controller, we do not need an accurate mathematical model. So if you have some knowledge or some data, set of data which you can use. So for example, in the case of washing machine, let's say you have a set of data and you have washed different types of fabric, right? In a not a washing machine, but maybe in similar kind of a thing, right? And what you have noticed is that if you have cotton fabric, right, or if you have cotton t-shirts or clothes, um, and if you use maybe 10 milliliter of the soap, right, and maybe the temperature is around 30 degrees centigrade. The temperature of the water is around 30 degrees centigrade, and if you wash the cloth or the t-shirt for, let's say, 45 minutes, more or less all the dirt from the fabric or the cloth is washed off, right? So you repeated this experiment and you have a set of data that for a cotton cloth, if you have one cloth, if you wash it for 45 minutes, all the dirt is washed off. If you have 10 clothes, maybe you have to increase the time of washing, right? Maybe 1 hour if you wash it, all the 10 clothes will be washed off. So like that, you have a set of data. So based on that set of data, you can design a controller for washing machine, right? Using fuzzy logic controller, right? So you do not need to design a mathematical model for this. Just based on some knowledge or based on your data, set of data, you can design a controller, a fuzzy logic controller. So this is a basic block diagram of your fuzzy logic controller. So overall, if you look at the entire block diagram, it looks like a closed loop system, right? Now, in the forward path, you have some knowledge or data, right? As I mentioned, you have some collection of data or some knowledge that this is how generally I want my controller to operate, right? So just some inaccurate or imprecise, I would say, imprecise data or knowledge. Using that, you provide it to fuzzification block, right? So based on this knowledge and data base, the fuzzification will generate some variables, right? So this variable is then sent to fuzzy inference rule. So there are some set of rules. So based on the variable and the rules, it will generate the final variable, which is then used to control your system. Okay. So that's how your fuzzy logic controller it works. The only thing which you need is some data or some background knowledge about how your uh, how you want your control system to operate. Okay. The third type of controller is called as your neural network or is your neural network controller. So neural, the word it comes from neurons. So neurons, they are your brain cells. Okay. So from neurons, you have neural network. Now, neural network, they kind of mimic or they act like human brain, right? So human brain, they have the ability to learn something, right? So this neural network controller, they also have this ability to learn new things. Okay, which is called as your machine learning, or um, an extension is an artificial intelligence, right? So basically, in the case of neural network controller, or even in human brains, we try to learn something by identifying a pattern, right? So humans also, they learn something by identifying a set of patterns, right? So this neural network, they also work on similar principle, so which we call as machine learning, and they try to identify the pattern. Okay. Now for designing a neural network, first of all we have to train our system, right? And then we test the system, and then we finally implement or use it. Okay. So these are the three steps, general steps, which we follow for designing a neural network controller. And it is quite often used in robotics. Nowadays it has machine learning and all this artificial intelligence, AI, they are quite popular nowadays. Yeah. So let's take an example over here. So this is a very basic block diagram of your neural network. So the first step of designing a neural network is to train your system. Okay. So we have to provide some training how it can identify the pattern. So let's say, um, let's take only two input. Okay. The first two input. Let's ignore the third one for the time being, just for this example. So let's say I'm giving, let's say two numbers, 1 and 2. Okay. And I'm training my system that the output, it should be 3. Right. Again, I gave another two number, let's say 2 and 2. And I told my system that the output should be 4. Okay. So something like then 3 and 2 I gave, and I told my system that the output is 5. Okay. So the next time, that is during the testing phase, um, what will happen is if I give two numbers, so my neural network has identified that if it is given with two numbers, they have to add the two numbers, right? So it has identified the pattern, right? If I give two numbers, the system or the neural network has to add them, has to perform addition, right? So now if I give, let's say two numbers, maybe 5 and 5, the system knows that if it gets two numbers, it has to add them, right? So it will produce an output of 10, right? So this is a very simple example which I have taken. Obviously, you do not use neural network for developing a calculator or for addition. It is used for several high-end operations, right? Um, but yeah, this is how it operates. You train your system, you make it identify certain pattern, right? And then start giving some fresh data to perform similar or to identify those patterns in the fresh inputs. Okay, so that's how your neural network they operates. The next type of controller is called as your genetic algorithm controller. So genetic algorithm, it uses the concept of natural selection and evolution, right? So as we all know that humans they evolve over time, right? So human evolution. So in the human evolution, it is quite easily observed that the best genes are transferred from one generation to another, right? So that's how humans evolved. And also it is seen that um, generally the kids are or the children they are better than the parents because the best genes from the parents are then passed on to the children, right? So this genetic algorithm, so another thing which I want to highlight is it is an algorithm. It is not a physical system, it is a set of program or a code. Okay, genetic algorithm. So it is not a physical system, it is a set of code or program which we can use with any type of control system. Okay, so genetic algorithm uses this concept of evolution or natural selection where the best genes are then passed on to the next generation or the offspring or the children. Similarly, genetic algorithm, it tries and identifies the best solution and then pass it on to the next generation like that. Okay, so something like if we are using this genetic algorithm to find the values of Kp, Ki, and Kd in a PID controller. Okay, so it can be used to find these constants or these values for a PID control. So what it will do is it will try and identify the best possible values of Kp, Ki, and Kd and then try to use it for another set of data or another set of input, right? So again, if it works, it is well and good. If it doesn't work, then it will try and adjust the value of Kp, Ki, and Kd again, and then try to use it for another set of data. So like that, it's a cyclic process. It tries to identify the best possible solution, use it for the next set of data, right? And then again adjust it, again it tries to use it for all the remaining set of data, right? So that's how this genetic algorithm it works, right? So as I mentioned, it is an algorithm. It would be a program or a set of codes which we can use with any other controller. So for this type of algorithm, obviously you would need a lot of computational power, right? So and obviously this is quite complex as well. This algorithm, it is not quite simple. It is quite complex to implement and it takes a lot of time and computational power. So this is a block diagram where you are using or where we are using the genetic algorithm to find the value of Kp, Ki and Kd and then send it to your PID controller, right? Okay, so those were the types of controllers which uh, we have or the basic type of controllers which we have. Now we are going to discuss about this PID controller in detail. Okay. Now this PID controller, as you can see, again overall if you look at the block diagram, right, it looks like a closed loop system, right? So you have the set point or the input which is then sent to the summing junction, and at this summing junction you um, take some feedback from the output and compare it with the set point and calculate the difference or the error. Okay, this error is then sent to the three parts of your PID, that is your proportional controller, your integral controller and your differential controller. Okay, and so error is, let's say, E of t. Okay, so based on this error signal, the three parts, they will generate their own output, and these outputs from your proportional, integral and differential controller, they are then added at this second summing junction, right? They are all added together, right? And then it generates the output of your PID, which is then sent to your process to perform certain operation or to control or adjust the output. And accordingly, your process or plant, it will generate the output. So over here, PID, it sends the control signal to your process, and according to the control signal, the process, it performs certain operation to adjust the output. Okay, so now let's start discussing about the individual parts over here. What is your proportional and what are their advantages, disadvantages, limitations and all, right? Let's try and understand about this proportional controller, right? All the three parts. So let's start with the proportional controller. Now, as I mentioned, or as we have seen, the output of this proportional controller, it depends on, or it is Kp multiplied by the error signal. Okay, so Kp is a constant that we adjust, right, or that we calculate the value. So Kp is a constant, and basically the output is proportional to your error. Okay, so output of proportional controller. Let's see. Let me write it again. So I would say output of P or proportional controller is proportional, or it depends on only the error signal, because Kp is a constant. Now if the error signal is large, if the error is large, the output of proportional controller will be also large. If the error is small, so if E of t is large, output is large, right? If E of t, the error is small, then the output is also very small. Okay, now let's take an example over here. So let's say a person is standing over here at the start point, and he or she has to walk all the way up to the finish line. Okay, and the distance, let's say it is 50 meters. Okay, distance between your start point and the finish point is 50 meters. Now this person has to walk in such a speed that he or she has to stop exactly at the finish point, right? The speed of the person should be such that he or she should stop exactly at the finish point. Okay, so since now if we use a proportional controller where the output of your proportional controller, it depends on the error signal E of t, or it is proportional to the error signal. So if error is large, the output should be large, and if error is small, the output should be small. So since at the beginning or at the start point, the error is maximum, right? So at the beginning, the distance covered by this person is 0. So obviously the error is maximum. It has to cover 50 meters. So its speed, or the person's speed, should be maximum. So the person will start walking, and the speed, and let's say this is distance, right? So the person's speed should be increasing, right? So he or she will walk at a very fast rate to reduce the error. Now after reaching, let's say, or after crossing the midpoint, right, 25 meters, now the person has to stop exactly at the finish point, so its speed should start reducing, isn't it? So that after reaching 50 meters, it stops, right? Exactly after reaching 50 meters. So initially, because the error was maximum, the speed of the person is increasing, right? After crossing the midpoint, the speed of the person should start reducing to stop exactly at 50 meters. Now, in this type of a condition, or in this example, the proportional controller, it is quite suitable, isn't it? Because if the error is large, the output or the speed is large. If the error is small, the speed should also be small. Okay. Now, in this case, if you have a large positive error, the output of your proportional controller should also be large. Okay, but if you have a small negative error, right? Let's say this person, it was unable to control the speed and it crosses the finish point. Let's say it reached 51, right? It reached 51 meters after the finish point. So the difference is a negative error minus 1 meters. It has crossed the finish point by 1 meter. Very small difference, right? It is a negative but very small. So the output produced by your proportional controller will be also very small, isn't it? For large error, the output is large. For small error, the output will be small. So to rectify or to come back to the finish point, it will be very slow, right? It will take a long time for your system to revert back or come back to the desired position. Because that error is small, the output will generated will be smaller, right? So if you have a small negative error, a proportionally smaller, okay, smaller negative control action will be performed by your proportional controller. So that is a limitation over here. Okay, so as long as you are finishing exactly at the desired position, it is okay. But if at all there is a overshoot, right? If at all there is a overshoot, or in this condition, if at all, if you cross the finish line, it will take, or the output generated to correct this error will be smaller. Okay, so this is the limitation of your proportional controller. Now, since the output it is Kp multiplied by E of t. So we have discussed the effect of this error, E of t. Now, if we increase the value of Kp, right, increase in Kp would lead to a faster response, right? So if you increase the value of Kp, your output will rise very quickly. Okay, this one. But there is a chance of overshoot, right? So if you are running towards the finish point, by the time you start, you may cross the finish line. So there is a chance of overshoot in this case if you increase the value of Kp, right? Uh, Although if you increase the value of Kp, it will reduce the steady state error, right? It will bring your output closer to the desired level, right? It will try to reduce the steady state error, but there is a chance of overshoot. Okay. Proportional controller, they can be used on its own. That means instead of a PID controller, you can just have a proportional controller, right? You are using only proportional control. So proportional controller, they can be used on its own, a P controller. Now, the next part in your PID is your integral controller. Okay. So the output of your integral controller, it depends on the value of Ki and the integration of this error E over time, right? Now, let's try and take the same condition for a different example, right? We have previously taken an example that the person has to walk up to 50 meter and stop exactly at the finish point. Now let's say we have, instead of the person, we have a drone, okay? And this drone, it has to fly up to 50 meters and stop or hover at 50 meters, right? It has to fly up to 50 meters and it has to stay at 50 meters. Now, if we are using proportional controller, obviously at the beginning, the error is maximum, right? When the drone is at the ground level, right? The distance is 50 meter or the error is maximum. So the drone will fly, or its speed or liftoff will increase and it will move towards the finish line. Okay, it will fly towards the finish line. And let's say after 25 meters, the speed of the propellers, or the speed at which drone is flying, it will reduce. It will start to reduce, and once it reaches 50 meters, the propeller will turn off. It will stop because it has reached 50 meters. If we are using proportional controller, according to the previous example, the propeller after reaching 50 meters, it will stop. So if the propellers, they will stop, that means drone will fall, right? After reaching 50 meters, if the propeller stops, the drone will fall to the ground. isn't it? So using only a proportional controller in this application, it is not suitable. We want the drone to uh, hover, or VER, I don't know the exact spelling. It should hover at 50 meters. That means the speed of the propeller should be constant, right? It should try and adjust the speed of the propeller such that the lift or such that it can hover at 50 meters. It should not fall back to the ground, right? It's the speed of the propeller should produce a fixed amount of thrust so that it stays at 50 meters, right? So the speed of the propeller should be a certain constant, right? So that is why in this application or in this example, we should have a integral controller. So this integral controller, if what it will do is, since the integration of 0, now after reaching 50 meters, right, after reaching the 50-meter point, the error is 0. E of t is 0 because it has reached the finish point. Okay, so the error is 0, and integration of 0, it is a constant. So overall, the output of your integral controller will be a constant. Ki is already a constant and integration of 0 is a constant. So altogether, the integration, the output of your integral controller will be a constant, right? That means the propeller will rotate at a constant speed and it will maintain that height, right? It will stay at 50 meters. Okay. So this is an advantage, we could say, of using a integral controller. Now, another property of integration is basically we integrate anything over time. Let's say if we are integrating from 0 to 10 seconds. Okay. So basically integration means adding the quantity. So error at 0, it will be added. Error at 1 second plus error at 2 seconds. Similar to that, all the way up to error up to 10 seconds will be added up. So if we are using integral controller, as we know from the property of integration, the error over time will get added up. Okay. Error over time gets added. Right? So what would happen is, if at all, because of any reason, if a large error occurs at any splits of second also, let's say because of some technical issue or some human error at 1 second, the error was very large, right? So this will get added up even if it was only for 1 second, this large error because of some noise or some any technical issues or anything. This error, it was large only for 1 second, but even then this will get added up, right? Because you are integrating the error signal, and as a result of that, the output generated by your integral controller will all of a sudden it will increase, right? It will produce a very large output because of even a large error for a small period of time, that will produce a very large control action performed by your integral controller. Okay. So that is one of the limitations of your integral controller. And that is why this integral controller is never used alone or never used on its own. That means you cannot have only an integral controller. You have to use a proportional controller along with the integral controller. So you would have PI controller, right? You cannot have a I controller because, as we know, because of integration, the errors will get added up, and if at all there is a small error or there is a large error for a small time also, it will create a disaster, or it will generate a correspondingly large control action. So that is why integral controller is never used on its own. Okay. Now, the third part in your PID controller is your derivative controller. Now, the output, it depends on KD multiplied by the derivative of the error signal. Now, dE by dt, we call it as the rate of change of error. Now again, considering the previous example of drone, okay, let's take this example. So if at all at, let's say, at 1 second, the error was maybe 100 something, right? So since you are using only integral controller, this error, even for a small period of time, they get added up. So what would happen is this drone will, the integral controller will try to, produce a very large output because of this large error for small period of time. It will produce a very large output. As a result of that, what would happen is this drone will start shooting off towards the finish point. Okay. Or let's take another example of this integral controller, that you have your drone, and let's say you are holding the drone at the ground level, right? You are holding your drone at the ground level. So since the error is not reducing, they will get added up in the case of integral controller. And if at all, after let's say 10 seconds, if you leave the drone, what would happen? This drone will start to shoot off towards the finish line, right? And there is obviously a chance that this drone will cross the finish line because its speed is very fast. It is rising at a very fast speed towards the finish line, right? So this was the limitation of your integral controller. Now in the case of derivative controller, since your output, it depends on the rate of change of error. If at all this type of conditions occur where your drone is rising at a very fast rate towards the finish point, right? So drone moving fast, right? If the drone is moving very fast towards the finish line, that means the rate of change of error is very large, right? Right? Because the drone is moving towards the finish point very quickly, so the rate at which the error is reducing is also very large, right? So this derivative controller will accordingly produce an output to control the rate at which the error is reducing, right? So if the error is reducing at a very fast rate, or the drone is flying towards the finish point very quickly, then the derivative controller will try and adjust it. It will try to reduce it, and um, yeah, so it will generate a control signal accordingly. And similarly, if the drone is rising very slowly towards the finish point, it will try to produce output to increase the speed at which drone is rising, right? So since the output, it depends on the rate of change of error. So this derivative controller, if we have it in your PID controller, it can adjust the rate at which the error changes, right? So it will try and reduce the speed so that it stops or hover at 50 meters or at the finish point. So that's the advantage of using a derivative controller. However, this derivative controller, they are quite sensitive towards the noise, right? So again, because of some noise, all of a sudden your error, it rises, right? So the rate of change of error will be quite large. So this derivative controller will again produce a very large uh, control signal to control this rate. Okay, so this derivative controller, they are quite sensitive to the system noise, and again because of that, it, they are never used on its own, right? So derivative controller also, they cannot be used alone because they are quite sensitive to system noise. And if you have a noise, rapid change in error, so noise will signify, or it will mean that the rate at which error is changing is quite rapid. Okay, and accordingly the derivative controller will produce a strong control action. So derivative controller is also never used alone. So basically the combination of P, I and D which you can get is, you can either have only a proportional controller, or you can have a PI controller, proportional along with integral, or you can have all three of them, P, I and D. So only these three types of controller or modes we can use. Okay. Now, coming back to the integral controller, there is something called as integral windup. And this happens because of the physical limitations of the component. Right? So it happens because of the physical limitation of the components. Now if we go back to the example of drone, and in the case of integral controller, if we are holding the drone at the ground level, so the error signal will keep on adding, right? Integration means addition over time, right? So integration of error signal would mean that you are adding the error over time. So if you are holding the drone for let's say 10 seconds, so the error will get added up. Since the error is not reducing, you are holding it, right? It is unable to fly. So the error will get added up. And what the controller will try to do is, it will try to provide more amount of power. Okay, the error is not reducing after 1 second, it will increase the speed of the propeller. Okay, so again after 2 seconds also the error is not reducing. Again produce more speed, produce more thrust. It will keep on sending additional, or it will keep on increasing the power for to the motors of the propeller, right? So the propeller will try and rotate much faster and faster and faster, right? But if you think about the physical limitation of those motor, right? Your motor, it has a certain speed at which, a certain maximum speed at which they can rotate, right? Let's say 500 RPM. Okay, so those motors, they cannot rotate more than 500 RPM. They cannot have a speed more than 500 RPM. So in this case where you are holding the drone, the propellers will try and, or the controller will try and send more power to produce more thrust. But there is a limit, there is a saturation point. If you provide more power above that saturation level, above that limit, the motors will get burned or it will destroy the motor, isn't it? So that is why we should have some cutoff limits put in place in the controller. So nowadays, and in the most recent type of drones, you might have seen that if you are holding the drone, right, the speed of the propeller initially they will increase, but after a few seconds, once it realizes that it is unable to take off, the motors they start rotating at a slower speed, or the speed uh, of the of the propellers they will reduce. So there is something called as cutoff limit, or some cutoff circuit is there in the modern drones. Right? So in this example over here on your screen, I've taken an example of a tank. Okay. So this is a simple water tank in which, let's say, I have set the limit at 50%. So I want my tank to be filled up to 50%. The level should be maintained at 50%. If it increases, this drain valve will open, or it should open, right, to bring the level down to 50%. And if the level of water in this tank it reduces, the drain valve should close, right, so that the level again increases back to 50%. So I have to maintain the level mm, of this tank at 50%. Now let's say because of any error, maybe external noise or some human error, right? Um, the set point was changed from 50% to 75. Okay, maybe for a few seconds only. But again, since you have an integral controller, right? Even if this error happens for a very small period of time, they will get added up, and accordingly a control signal will be generated. A large control signal will be generated. So even for 1 second also, if you change the set point or the level of this tank to 75, the controller will start performing some operation, or it will try to maintain that level. After 1 second, you have again changed it back to 50%, but by that time, the controller has already performed a certain operation, right? So if you change it to 75, the controller will close the drain valve, so that the level of the water it rises to 75. Okay, but after 1 second, you have changed it back to 50%. So again, the controller will try and generate a control signal to open the drain valve, because by that time maybe the level of water should have already started rising. Okay, so it will again instruct the drain valve to open. But let's imagine a situation. So your drain valve is connected to a motor, right? the motor, it will take some time to start rotating. Again, it has some saturation limit, right? It's not like you provide the power and the motor starts rotating immediately. It will take a few seconds, right? It will take some time to start performing that operation. Okay, so since your motor has some delay or it has some saturation limit, by the time the motor starts to operate and this drain valve starts to open, maybe your tank will be completely full and you may have some overflow. Yeah. So this type of situations or this type of integral wind up where because of some error and because of some physical limitation of the component happens, uh, that is called as your integral wind up. Okay. To avoid this integral wind up, we generally prefer to set certain limits in our design, in our control system, so that it does not happen. This integral wind up does not happen. So if my motor, it can only rotate at 500 RPM, I would generally set a cutoff point at maybe 450 or 490 RPM only. Okay, so that my motor is safe and secure. We set a cut-off point. Below this limit or below this saturation level. Okay, to avoid your integral wind up. Now there is a demo in MATLAB. If you type in SL demo and this anti-wind up, you can see that on your MATLAB also. So if you look at this slide, the blue curve in this is your input, okay, and the yellow curve is the output. So as you can see, the blue curve or the input, it was changed at, let's say this is 80, right? At 80 seconds the input was changed, but it took extra 10 seconds. So the output, because of the saturation of your component, it changed only after 90 seconds. So there is a 10-second delay when you change the input and the output changed after 10 seconds. Okay, so there is a delay, and that's why or this is an example of your integral wind up. Okay, so we should have some kind of a cutoff limit, or we should include or consider that extra time which our components take to respond, right, to avoid integral wind up. Now again, if you try and reduce the delay or the difference, right, again you may have some overshoot over here. So basically the best possible solution of integral wind up is to keep a note of the physical limit of your components and design your controller accordingly. Okay. Now in this slide I have summarized all the points. So if what happens with the rise time, if you what happens with your the value of kp for this PID controller. So kp is the proportional gain, ki is the integral gain, and kd is the derivative or differential gain. Right? So basically we have discussed, I've kind of summarized it here. And similarly, I have also mentioned the points, the important points for PID controller. You can read it through. But the main thing which I want to continue is about tuning, or this is the last thing which we have to learn in today's class, is how to tune the PID controller. That is how to find the best values for KP, KI and KD, right? So one of the way is to manually tune the PID. So manually adjust the value of KP, KI and KD, which is possible, but you would need a lot of experience for doing that. Okay. So as I mentioned, if you adjust the value of KP, you also have to change the value of KI and KD accordingly. Right? It's not just if you change one of the values and the rest of the values will be okay. No, if you change the value of KP, you have to adjust KI and KD as well. Okay, so that's some of the issues for manual tuning. You need some experience for doing that. So for us, we have a method for tuning the PID controller. So that method is called as Ziegler-Nichols method, right? So Ziegler, he gave two methods, one for open loop and one for closed loop. So for open loop system, uh, this method is called as process reaction method. So if you have an open loop control system, you can use process reaction method to find the values of Kp, Ki and Kd. Now obviously it won't be very accurate. So again there is a scope of manually adjusting the values of Kp and Kp, Ki and Kd, all those constants. But it will give you a nearby value, right? And after that you can tune further, you can adjust those values, right, to further improve the output, but it will generate a basically good enough output. Now for the closed loop system, this method is called as ultimate cycle method, and both these methods, they produce quarter amplitude response. Okay, now what is a quarter amplitude response? So basically your output produced after adjusting the values will be something like this. Okay, so quarter amplitude response, it means the ratio of second overshoot and the first overshoot, it will be less than quarter or 1/4. Okay, so this type of a response you should get after using Ziegler-Nichols method. Now let's talk about the first method, which is for open loop system, which is called as your process reaction method. Okay, so in this method what we do is we provide a step input to the open loop system. So we have a control system, we have connected the PID. Now we have to adjust the values of Kp, Ki and Kd. So before connecting the PID, first what we do is we send a step signal, step input to the control system which we have designed. So it will produce an output something like this on your screen. So after this point, the output will be something like this, stable, right? So it will rise at the beginning in the transition state, in the transition region, and then finally after some time your output will get stable. Okay, so in this transition region, right, so after this point the output is stable or the response is stable. So what we do is we find the amplitude of this by drawing a line backwards towards the y-axis, and we measure the amplitude A. Okay. And the second thing which we measure is the slope of this portion, this middle section. Okay, the slope of this middle section. So slope, it can be measured by drawing the line touching this curve, right? So we try to find the slope of this middle section. So from here to here. Okay, so we draw a line, and the slope is represented by capital R. So we draw a line touching this slope or this curve and extend it all the way to the x-axis. So we have the value of amplitude, we have found the value of slope, which we are calling it as R, and the point at which this line for the slope it cuts the x-axis, we measure the length, the distance from the 0 to this point where this line is cutting the x-axis. So we calculate three values from the graph, and then we can use these equations, right? So we have the value of amplitude, we have the value of slope R, and we have the value of length L. So if you are using only proportional controller, obviously you would have to control or adjust the value of Kp. If you are using proportional and integral controller, you have to adjust two values, Kp and Ki, right? So you can use the two equations here. And similarly, if you are using all three, that is P, I, and D, so you have to adjust all the three constants, Kp, Ki, and Kd, right? So you have the three equations here. Okay, so based on the values which you have calculated from the graph, you can just use these equations and find out the value of Kp, Ki, and Kd. But this method is for open loop system. Now the second method, which is called as your ultimate cycle method, it is for closed loop system. Now in this case, what we do is, so in the case of ultimate cycle method, so this method is for closed loop system. Okay. Now in this method, the first step, step 1 is to initiate the values of Kp, Ki, and Kd. Okay, so the first thing which we do is Ki and Kd, these two constant, we set them to be 0, and we set the value of proportional constant Kp to be 1. Okay, and we have applied the step input. Okay, we have already provided the step input, and we have set the value of Ki, Kd equal to 0 and the value of Kp equal to 1. Now what we do is we increase. So step 2 is to increase the value of Kp. Okay, we increase the value of Kp until we get sustained acceleration. Okay, so in the graph on this slide, as you can see, you have sustained acceleration. So these accelerations, they are neither reducing nor they are increasing, right? Your output or the response of your system is it is accelerating between, let's say, 1.9 and 0.1. So between 0.1 and 1.9, you have continuous acceleration, or your output is changing continuously. It is neither reducing, these oscillations, they are neither reducing nor they are increasing. That means your system is now marginally unstable or marginally stable. Right? Either ways you can say marginally stable or marginally unstable. Okay. Right. So that value of Kp is your critical value, right? And uh, it is denoted by Kpc. So the value, critical value of Kp. Okay. So Kpc. So we'll note down that value at which you are getting sustained acceleration, and from the response or from this acceleration we calculate the time period. Okay, so we measure the time between two peaks. What is the time period? And right, so we measure the time between the two peaks like that. Okay, and that we denote by Tc. Right, so we got these two values and we can use these two values to find the value of Kp, Ki and Kd by using these equations. So again, if you have a proportional controller, you would only need to adjust the value of Kp. If you have Pi controller, you would have to adjust Kp and Ki, which can be calculated by the equations here. So all these equations, they depend on the value of Kpc or Tc, the time period. Okay, so we have already identified from the graph. And lastly, if you are using all three of them, that is proportional, integral and differential, that is PID controller, you have to adjust all the three values or tune all the three values, Kp, Ki and Kd. Right? So all these equations, they are given. Maybe in your coursework you would need to use these methods, which you have to design a PID and tune it, right? So either of the two methods you have to use. Okay, so depending on whether your system is closed loop or open loop, you can select one of the two methods and tune your PID. Okay, so this was all that I wanted to discuss in today's class, and these are the tutorial MCQs and MATLAB exercises here. So I'll pause the recording now.